Brings us to probably the least tangible part of the colour grading process in terms of how it's supporting narrative, but also potentially, with the right subject matter, the most powerful use of it as well. And that's colour grading to add meaning, to convey feeling to the viewer. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that anything that I'm going to do to this commercial for Oxen Origin is going to in some way make you feel a certain way, or throw up warning signs about, how you feel about a character. It's not that type of thing. It's a simple commercial. It's about, in this case, making it look clean and glossy and attractive and conveying, the quality of the, again, essentially what's on sale here, what you're buying into, which is them and their product, their food. But that's not to say that in the right circumstances you can't convey feelings and mood and meaning to the viewer through your work, colour grading your films. I've got a simple shot here. It's, as I say, it's not really going to work with what we're doing, but a very simple before and after here, where I've really cooled down and I've checked on the vectorscope that the blues are heading in the right direction, and then I can simply apply a little bit of sort of warming. Essentially, if we pull this round, I can actually warm up the sand and the bank here to kind of create that complementary kind of colour system that we've been talking about. I can work on that and I can build that up, but again, it's more about balance. There's no particular meaning in this, although it would be quite nice to capture that sense of early morning fishing. I like the kind of the feeling of these guys, through these visuals and these landscapes. We could possibly almost kind of give a sense that Josh and Mike have gone out on a day boat that morning and and caught their own fish. There's a certain element of that freshness that I might want to convey. But let me show you some examples of where I think this is used incredibly powerfully, and that's the film Whiplash. So there's 4 key colour palettes that are used. So rather than, in the case of our promo, our commercial for Oxen Origin, we're talking about an overall aesthetic in a 30, 60-second cut. Here we're talking about a feature film where we've got 4 distinct looks that take us through the narrative, and they're all incredibly effective at making us feel a certain way. The 4 kind of key ones we've got, first of all, a neutral one. So skin tones are faithful, whites are white, greys are grey, and it's used an awful lot in the early parts of the film where we're wanting to kind of set us up essentially for what's about to come. So we're setting up what appears to be a normal university, a normal student studying in a normal university. And of course things go so awry later on in the story that this setup helps us with that. So you'll notice that pretty much everyone in the scene, apart from our main character, are dressed in kind of greys, very slight kind of blue to their clothes, and then we've got this kind of big red stripe that's being used. Now that is part and parcel of what we've just been talking about, which is directing the viewer's gaze. So we're helping them look in the right place by seeking out that high colour contrast in this case. But generally speaking, we've got clean skin tones. We start off with these scenes where you'll notice that, key characters here in this scene wearing greys. Remember what I said about the white of the kitchen. It's really allowing other colours to come forward. So by everyone else being in grey and white, it helps draw our attention to the only person that's wearing anything of any kind of saturated value, which is our main character wearing a very kind of saturated blue and red striped top. As we move forward, though, and some of the first interactions that we have between J.K. Simmons's kind of deranged teacher and our main character, Andrew, I believe his name is in the film, this is their kind of first interaction with each other. We don't realise at this point that things go so wrong. Again, skin tones you'll notice are natural. The whites of the clothes are clean, they're not tinted in any way. But as we start to move through into the next kind of part of the film, where we see Miles's character moving through some communal areas on the way back to his digs or his room, his rental apartment, and suddenly we're hit with this extreme acid green. It's vile, you know. It's in fact it's bile is what it is. It's a disgusting colour. It's really nothing that you would ever want to see, and particularly the way it's allowed to creep into the skin tones really taint and create this sickly appearance. Now, what's interesting is he's in this scene. He's surrounded by people making lots of noise. His head's down. Clearly, this is someone who wants to kind of get on, but he's having to kind of endure his environment whilst trying to focus on what he's wanting to achieve. Now, this green is particularly important because this green comes back in other scenes. So this is one of the first scenes where we see him rushing to get somewhere because J.K. Simmons told him to be somewhere at a specific time. It's also one of the first times we realise that J.K. Simmons is toying with him because he makes him get there way before he needed to. And in his rush to kind of do what he's been told, he trips, he hurts himself. Now that becomes quite a recurring theme, the fact that he is damaged trying to meet the approval of his teacher, and this sickening green is used in that scene as well. Green also pops up, and this is where I think this is really powerful. It also pops up in two very specific characters. His dad, who in the story is kind of very dismissive of his decisions about what he wants to do as a career, not supportive of him being a drummer at all. And the other person that we see the exact same green used on is in the top of the character, whose name I forget, but the character who's currently in the band playing drums, who Miles's character needs to kind of usurp in order to get into the band himself. So for him to achieve his objective, he has to outperform and get this guy out of the drum seat. So interesting and so deliberate, of course, that it's the exact same green. Different tops, obviously, but the exact same green that's used that picks up with those other scenes where he's trying to win the approval. He's gone to extremes and damaged himself in some way, either through car crashes or kind of mentally damaged himself, trying to get where he's trying to go and kind of get that golden ticket, if you like. Very, very clever and deliberate use of colour there to convey meaning about a certain scene and about a certain person, and essentially the forces that are kind of standing in his way. The last big look, of course, in this film is the vivid, oversaturated, dangerous kind of looking oranges that are used and pushed into skin tones and the environment around them. And what's interesting about it is it veers from sickening kind of orange to almost a gold colour, back and forth. And what it's doing is it's using the scenes where you're kind of realising that the teacher is kind of abusing him, basically. There's this scene where he slaps him because he's not getting the timing right, which are very orange, with these slightly more golden moments where he's still a threat, but we feel like possibly his character is winning his approval. He's doing what he wants him to do. And it's really it's kind of like this rose-tinted view of what he thinks he's doing and what we know is happening, which is that he's being manipulated, and it's really not going to end well for him. Remember, look at this and think back of those neutral skin tones where we started. We're progressing the story through colour in a very coherent and clever way. As we move through to the latter part of the film, we realise, no, that the teacher has in fact set him up again, and kind of tried to shame him and embarrass him in front of a huge audience and kind of take away this opportunity from him, which he then turns around, but he turns around in a way that kind of the teacher allows to kind of reflect well on him. And it's a really interesting dynamic, and the colours that are used throughout these scenes are veering back and forth between gold and sunshine and kind of positivity and deep, nasty oranges in the skin tones, which are just unhealthy. If you go and buy this film on iTunes or bought it on Blu-ray or whatever, you'll notice the cover artwork is orange. The whole thing is this blank, saturated orange. And when I saw it for the first time, it actually allowed a certain amount of information to click into place. Again, this is my interpretation, but I would be amazed if this wasn't part of the motivation. But the colour that's used is almost exactly the same orange that's used on toxic warning labels, on bleach and things like that. You know, if you look at them under a vectorscope, they're basically the same. Similar intensity, similar saturation, similar hue. And it suddenly fell into place because there's this kind of well-known saying, if someone's in a kind of an abusive relationship or a relationship that's not good for them, there's this expression of that being a toxic relationship. And it was kind of a moment for me where I realised that this film was so clever with its use of colour. To show and use these toxic greens and these toxic kind of almost radioactive oranges to show that this is an abusive, toxic relationship that's going on. The dynamic here is not healthy, and it's an incredible use of colour. And what's fascinating, of course, is the first time I watched this film, I didn't think about any of that. I just watched it, absorbed it, and loved it. And it was actually only on repeat viewings and thinking about what films have really used colour that I started to kind of see just the level of effort that had gone into the palette that was used to convey meaning through colour grading to the viewer. Incredibly powerful use of colour grading in this. So there we have it. Essentially, what we've looked at over the course of the last hour is a whole range of simple techniques. I think hopefully you agree they're not complicated techniques, but techniques that you can use to bring colour and your consideration of colour into your productions, planning for it in pre-production, shooting with it in mind, and then developing that look that you've established and the palette of colours that you've embedded into your film in post-production, so that the colour grading process becomes one of storytelling, and the same with that editing is storytelling, rather than a kind of an arbitrary pass or just a LUT that you drop on because you think it looks pretty in isolation. It becomes something far more deep and thoughtful, and because of that, a far more pleasing image and a more powerful message that you're sending to your viewer, who, let's not forget, is incredibly good at decoding imagery. Everyone is fluent. It's like a language that you don't realise that you can speak fluently, but everyone can. The visual language of cinema, the visual language of film, TV, it's well established, and we've seen that in some of the examples that I've shown you. And so borrowing from those, learning from those, and incorporating them into your own film productions is only going to help elevate your work into the same kind of sphere that these other productions are operating in. And people will recognise that. They won't necessarily be consciously aware of it, but they'll certainly be subconsciously aware of this, and they'll pick up on it, and there'll be a perception of quality, of meaning, of tone to your film that's hopefully, if everything I've said is right, hopefully will really elevate your work, and you'll see the rewards from it almost instantly. So next time you're going into pre-production on your next film, start to build mood boards, start to look at inspirational colour palettes from films or TV shows, or it could just be photographers or artists or anyone or anything that is inspiring you with its choice of colour. This transcends film. This is embedded in all branding and graphic design and packaging and marketing all around us every single day, right down to the choice of the colours of the walls in your house or a hotel that you might be staying in. These are all things that we can use to inspire us, and collect colour swatches, take photos of things, make notes about stuff, and use that to inspire your colour choices in your next production. If you can follow these tips and apply them in that way, then hopefully you'll find that your productions will just reach new levels, and you'll start to see those rewards in the feedback and hopefully accolades that you'll get for the film that you'll be making next and the one after, and keep refining it and keep working at it and keep letting colour become part of your toolkit and part of your process for creating your films. Thank you so much for joining me for the last hour. I hope you've got a lot out of this course. This will be the first part of a bigger colour grading series that I'm doing with MZ, so there's plenty more to come, and there's more areas for us to explore colour and its uses. But for now, thank you so much, and until next time.
I don't know how and don't know why, but I've been toasting all my life.